Welcome to Roofing Road Trips with Heidi. Explore the roofing industry through the eyes of a long-term professional within the trade. Listen for insights, interviews, and exciting news in the roofing industry today.
Hello and welcome to another Roofing Road Trips from Roofers Coffee Shop. This is Heidi Ellsworth, and today we're going to talk about codes. Yes, and in particular, solar codes. So this is some information that you really need, that we need as an industry to be really embracing. So we got the experts from S5 here to talk about all that's happening around this solar code. Mark, Dustin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here again.
I know we keep pulling you back in. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
So for the few people who don't know you two, let's go ahead and start with some introductions. So, Dustin, can you kind of tell us, who you are, what you do, and a little bit about S5?
Yeah, for sure. So, what I do, I'll start there. S5 is a family-run company. My dad came up with the core technologies in the early 90s for being able to put things on metal roofs and do it in a manner that doesn't jeopardize the integrity of the roof. You think about what is a common problem is the trades that come later. You have this perfectly magical standing seam roof that is engineered to function, not being, so to speak, fixed to a purlin or have holes in it. And trades come out later and put HVAC on it, put solar on it, and do it in means that jeopardizes the integrity of the roof. And so S5, what we do is we believe metal roofing is a superior roof technology, and we want to galvanize the entire world with metal roofing and do it in such a way that we make it not only the most sustainable option, but the easiest to fix things to use, and, get the full lifespan out of that roof. It's things that happen later to the roof that jeopardizes how long it's going to last. And so that's kind of that's what we do. This is our big goal. I started, I don't know, I think I was like 7 with my dad and packaging what we called widgets. S5 wasn't quite named yet. So we would packet widgets and we'd package them in the garage as kids many, many years ago. And since then, I rodeoed and went to college on a rodeo scholarship. And ironically, I got a bachelor's degree in communication science and a minor in English. But somehow I ended up in code standard engineering with S5. And I guess the reason being is when I came on full time, I think I started in marketing, and I saw we needed some help with code and standard.
Yeah.
We were constantly getting questions. I also picked up the phone and talked to the customers. And so they're asking questions about where a product like ours falls in the building code, or is it listed to any given standard, and the answer is no. It was a niche, so to speak, that the code really hasn't looked at, and neither had, standard organizations. And so my job, I guess, blossomed into testing, engineering, creating new products, as well as working with AHJs, the building officials, the guys that write the code and the guys that write the standards, getting on the standard technical panels I always say if you're not at the table, you're on the plate.
That's right.
And
Yes.
so we strive to make sure metal roofing's not forgot when code and standards being created. And we also strive to make sure that not only is metal roofing not remembered, but components such as ours are, and they're evaluated in such a way that sets the bar the same for everybody.
Right.
I don't care if somebody has another widget that fixes the metal roof, provided the rules are the same.
Mm-hmm.
With the testing, the engineering, and whatnot. I mean, and so we do a lot of work in that area. And it was kind of, I mean, that's not where I thought I was gonna start, but I guess I had a knack for it.
Yeah.
People say I saunter, and saunter to me is not a bad thing. It's if you're able to saunter, you'll get along with code and standard, knowing that it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a tremendous amount of time, energy, and just staying at it and knowing that it's going to be a slow process.
Yeah, I tell you that it is. And I kudos to you, because coming from marketing and communications and rodeo and everything else you do, and then you are so well known in the code and standards realm and everything that's out there. And we forgot to say at the beginning, Dustin, your last name is Haddock. So Dustin Haddock.
Right. Yeah. I'm the youngest.
Here you go. I love it. We also have with us Mark Gies. So Mark, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Heidi. So I'm involved on the product management side at S5, but like Dustin, I wear a lot of hats, both technically and on the business side. I've been here for, time flies. I've been here more than 4 years now, and I've been in solar for almost 15 years, which is a long time.
Yeah.
And I've seen it all. And most of that has been with mounting systems, racking, codes and standards. One thing I'll say is when I started getting to know Dustin and the S5, one of the most surprising things that I learned, I didn't realize this, is that you can actually get a rodeo scholarship to go to college. I did not know that.
It's a sport. It's a sport.
Older, I did not know that.
Well, okay,
So,
going
anyway.
into the codes and what's happening with solar. Let's start out on, this whole roofing road trip is really to talk about that. Like what's happening with
Right.
solar racking codes, what's taking effect. So Dustin, let's start with you. Can you talk to us about the new code, or give us maybe a history of this code of UL 2703? Kind of what is it and why should we care?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll give you some context as well. When I talk about UL standards and UL listings and stuff like that, to put it, why they exist, why they're there is for safety, human safety, to make sure, that it sounds maybe a little bit rude, but basically it says we've looked at this product so thoroughly that we're pretty sure it's not going to kill you.
Good.
And we were getting questions about, do we have a UL listing? And what is our UL listing? And, there just wasn't anything that existed. And so we play in the solar world a fair bit. And I started studying what listings, UL, other NRTLs, what standards, if you will, already existed around photovoltaics. And the big one at the time was 1703. And so I sent our PV kit and some of our components to Underwriters Laboratory and said, I know I can't list this to 1703, but there are things within that standard that could be relevant to products like ours. And at the same time, I also did that with Intertech. another NRTO,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of was working with them both to get it on their radar. UL came back and said, yeah, we can look at this, based on the bonding and grounding within 1703, which is, electrical, that making sure people don't get shocked.
Right.
And they can look at it from some mechanical aspect as well. Instead of, 1703 has mechanical loading for modules. It's pretty arbitrary. And so that they said, well, we just take your product and mount the modules and run the same test. And, we could get either a recognized component or, it doesn't qualify for the full standard, but it'll give you, some sort of certification. And in doing that, it took it was a process, but
Yeah.
they said, hang on, we're working on a new standard for racking components. And maybe the best route is not to go with 1703, but to wait for this new standard to come out. And I was like, well, I don't know what's in the new standard. I have a copy. And the response was, well, there's one copy right now, and it's closely guarded. You just got to trust me. And in doing that, that was what they were talking about was subject UL 2703. Now, the difference between a subject and a standard is it's a subject until it's been approved by the STP and goes through the ANSI process. And the ANSI process basically is you get a bunch of professionals from different spaces, manufacturing, consultants, installers, building officials, all, go over this subject and chew it up and spit it out until everybody says, yep, we agree. Then it becomes a standard.
Right. And can I jump in, Dustin? I think that's a very important thing, and that's called consensus driven. And that's what separates a standard from just people doing something on a one-off basis. So that's a very important part of why a standard is accepted, is that it's voted on by a committee of experts. So it has gravitas. People believe it from this consensus driven. That's the key word. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're not going to talk about lead, because that's not a consensus driven. Anyways, so we went through this process and weren't sure what was going to be added or subtracted from this subject UL 2703. So we ran a gamut of tests, not knowing if it would be included in the listing but we didn't want to go through the process, yet again. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? And that's ironically where Mark and I met.
Right.
In the process of this subject UL 2703, which evaluates racking components, everything from the rack up. It doesn't look at structural to the roof, which that's another story we can get on maybe later. But that we were working very hard to be the first.
Yeah.
The first listed to subject 2703.
And who won, by the way?
You won.
Okay.
And so Mark won because I was the guy that was going through the learning curve with UL. So when Mark came in later, they had already figured it all out based on my, he will tell you a different story.
Yeah, I'll tell you a different story. But
I love it.
That's essentially what Mark and I met.
Yeah, all right.
So I love, so, okay. So where are we now, right now? And maybe Mark, start with you on 2703 and kind of what that's doing for us.
So 2703 is highly established now, and when we talk about the acceptance of standards in just permitting, it's widely accepted now. So it has morphed a little bit as all things. It's evolved. There's been some changes to it, but it's pretty much a very sought after, and everybody recognizes it as sort of, this is what it takes to get a project approved. You have to demonstrate that you have a system that's compliant or listed or certified to this UL 2703. But it also has opened up some gaps, and I think that's what's relevant to the roofing industry. And Dustin mentioned that, is that the scope. When you create a standard, you have to create the scope, because then you could take forever to do it. And so the scope that we had set was, we're not going to deal with what touches the roof. We're going to deal with the racking, but not if you screw it down or use weight to hold it down or some other type of attachment. That's out of the scope. A little bit has changed, but basically that gap really had created a lot of turmoil in the fact that, when you do have attachments, and we sell a lot of attachments to metal roofs, obviously, and there's a lot of other ones that are out there that use adhesives that are patches for asphalt roofs or single ply membrane roofs. And now getting them approved for a project, that gap has been very difficult to deal with.
Okay.
So, because the reason there's a standard is everybody, it's consensus driven. Everybody understands it and believes it. And if you say, throw this at a building inspector, they get it. But if there's a gap there, and there's tests that prove waterproofing, there's other tests, but everybody has their own version, and it's very confusing and chaotic on that. Exactly where the interface is of the solar mounting system and that roof. That interface has been this gap that I think has created a lot of uncertainty and just creates more inefficiency in the permitting process.
Yeah, and I mean, to tag team on that, like, what is within UL 2703 is bonding and grounding, electrical, and that, again, that's module to rack, or racking components, and making sure that anything that's likely to be energized has an adequate ground path. The next big part of 2703 is fire, which it's really kind of comical how that came along. I think it was NRCA. UL does putting photovoltaics on a roof change the fire rating of the roof? So if you have a Class A roof, but you put a bunch of solar panels on there, which are highly flammable, is it going to change the rating of the roof? Right. And the famous answer, and I love saying it because it gets you out of hot water, is it may or may not. So in answering that question, fire testing, assembly fire testing got put into, and that kind of went into a gray area because, UL wasn't looking at the roof. It was just looking at the racking components. Well, now we started doing some form of assembly tests with the rack and the roof and setting it on fire and seeing if it will affect the fire rating of the roof that you're putting it on. And so that became a big part. And then the other one is mechanical load. Is the racking component fixing the module in such a way that the module's not going to get overloaded with snow or overloaded with wind or somehow slip out, right? So there's a those are the three big categories in 2703. Again, what's missing, like Mark was saying, is, okay, because the NRC then asked the question again to UL, and they said, okay, well, does 2703, within the scope of 2703, does that look at the connection of the rack to the roof.
And it did
You
not.
know how
Does not.
no, and
Wow.
I mean, it went in front of the STP, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, no, it does not. And there had to be a formal letter and a formal whole deal that says no, that's not within the scope of UL 2703. And then I'll let you give the introduction to 2703A.
Yes. So now we're looking at 2703A
3A.
and closing the gap, Mark.
Right. Yeah. So the creation of that was, and the NRCA was involved with that actually. So, that was sort of just, this is the next step we have to do. We have to close that gap because there's, it was widely known that, again, this interface of where the solar meets the roof is tough for inspectors to approve or not approve because it's just, you need that standard to sink your teeth into. You need a standard, or you need an acceptance criteria that's also consensus driven, or IAPMO does evaluation criteria. So something like that people can say, if it's listed to this or passes this, then I believe it's done right.
Right.
And so that's really been important. So UL had a small team of people, and they created what's now known as 2703A. And that is to sort of take a step in that direction of clearing up that gap. It looks at waterproofing, and then it looks at material. This is about flashing now. Now we're talking about flashing.
Okay.
So it's about as installed, how waterproof it is. And then it also looks at the material to make sure that it's durable, that it will withstand the test of time. So it references probably tests that people know already, which is like the ASTM 2140, which is an underwater test. There's a wind-driven rain test. There's some ozone tests for material, RIP tests, strength tests, all sort of going back to ASTM, but they're gathered together in this standard, which is 2703A. It's now, well, actually, it's not a standard yet.
Okay.
It's a subject matter. So now we're back to, it's a subject matter. And then, but the plan is, and we were just on the phone with the UL main point person on this, the plan is next Q1 of next year to ratify that. Again, consensus driven.
Yeah.
Ratify that, and so becomes a full blown standard.
So we're getting the news really right here. You're just going off the phone with them. This is great.
It's not even really published yet.
Yeah,
I mean, you can get onto UL's website.
Yeah.
But you can get onto UL's website and you can see a digital, page by page.
Right.
But it's still very hot and fresh, and when it's a subject, that means it could change pretty dramatically.
Yeah, exactly.
Becomes a standard.
Right.
And I mean, I think we worked on 2703. That became a standard in 2015, but I think Mark and I were working on that in 2010.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Started to work on it. So, Heidi, I guess the one thing in thinking this to the roofing community is this 2703A really is about roofing as much as it is about solar, because it's using really common techniques that are used for flashing, penetrations or flashing over other things with various methods. And it's saying, we're going to now, people who want to put we're going to be recognized as a way to evaluate flashing for solar systems. But it's not too different than things people will recognize who are part of the roofing community, I think.
Well, and that's the big thing is, I mean, in NRCA, so what UL did, which was kind of different from their normal process, is 2703A was an idea. That idea then got drafted in the form of a subject. But before that subject was published or anything like that, they pulled together STP members from 2703 and put this document in front of us and said, what do you think? Ta-da! And I mean, NRCA was involved with that too. And I think really appreciated that they weren't rewriting the book. They were using known roofing standards such as ASTM within the standard to test flashing components.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, that's a big deal because you're
not
something broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not reinventing the wheel. But it's using which ones are the important ones, because one AHJ may say, oh, I want you to do this underwater test. One AHJ may say, okay, TSA 100, which is wind-driven rain, that's good enough. So this is a way to say, this is what we think.
Right.
We kind of all agreed on it. And, as Dustin's your favorite word, when this was sort of introduced, there was a lot of cussing and discussing going on, to quote Dustin, about, to try to get it from this, just an initial subject to now it's evolved multiple times since then, still as a subject matter. But, they are doing the work of looking at share stakeholders from various industries like NRCA, like the roofing community and the solar community and manufacturers, to try to fine tune it so that it can be accepted.
What I love about it, like, they put ASTM 2140 in there.
Right.
And that is, I mean, that's metal roofing,
right.
That's our baby. Right.
Yeah.
And I always say, if you got 6 inches of static water pressure on your roof, you probably have bigger problems than a leak.
Right. Yeah. We on all our products that penetrate for exposed fasten type roofs, we do this test, ASTM 2140. That's been incorporated into this standard, into this subject, 2703A. So for low slope roofs.
So how should contractors, as we're looking at that, so it's going to be adopted, we believe, but we don't know for sure what the final will be because it could change, but sometime in Q1. And then once that comes out, because we have a lot, I was just talking to a major contractor out of Dallas yesterday, and they just changed the name of their company from roofing and waterproofing to roofing, waterproofing, and solar. And it's there's a big movement there. How can contractors find out this information and make sure they're compliant?
Right, and it's interesting you say that, because I got a business card sitting on my desk, and it's roofing, remodeling, and solar. Like, yeah, like a lot, and that's what we wanted, because it's the trades that come later. An electrician trying to do roofing work, I'll just leave it there. I mean, the guys that should be putting solar on are the roofers. I agree. Hire the electrician to come do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talk about that at the shows we're at, like MetalCon. I talk to roofers and say, you guys are the perfect discipline to get into solar, to do that mechanical installation. And, and I think that's happening. Honestly, more and more people come interested in that, to these shows, and want and get into it. Like you're seeing now, you add solar, roofing and solar now to your title.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that does open up another section. Is once a standard is created, it's the next challenge is, how do you create the demand for it? How do you get a building inspector in Texarkana to say, okay, you need to, in order to be on this roof, you need to be listed to 2703A, your flash,
right,
or compliant with it, or whatever it is. So that's sort of how does a standard get traction and get people who really want it? And that's, I don't know. That's the tough part. Either you do it through organizations like structural engineering organizations like SEOC in California, and then you actually, at some point, and people propose it to code changes, so that the code actually says, if you build this, it has to be compliant. It has to be compliant with this or listed to this. And 1703, 2703 are in some of these codes now, but it's years later. After they've been ratified that happened. So it's a slow evolution of when things happen, and when they get, and then when 10 years later, when every
code has it,
and it has to be adapted. And in that process, it gets adopted and people start using it anyway, even though it's not necessary. It's just something, like I said, they bite their teeth into, and that makes them happy. And
and it also makes sense that contractors and businesses should be adopting this when they know it's going to be there. Why not start now? So but not now, but as soon as this becomes a standard, really getting into that, and they can get with you at S5. I mean, with both of you, with your amazing team, to really understand that as they're adding solar to their business, right?
Right. And we will, our products that will fall under this, we will, once it gets standard created, or if not before, we'll start having our products, listed to that, because we tend to be ahead of the curve on.
And we've already done that testing, before it was ever put in a standard. Or in the subject. I mean, a couple of things I want to point out though is, and this is where he that shall be nameless, good buddy at UL.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
And both him and I we agree to disagree a lot. And my theory is,
now I know,
the standard should exist before it's in the code. That you can't codify something before we know how we're going to test it. Right. And that's where the sky fell a little bit with the fire testing. Because nobody it was required by code, but there wasn't even a test method established, right? Right. But to his point is, you have to create the demand, and creating the demand, you've got to get it into the code, even before it becomes a consensus document, like in some way.
Right.
And so I agree with him there.
Right.
It's just got to be done strategically. And I mean, we're already working to get some language. Is it 2027 building code?
Yep, 2027.
Get some language in there referencing it. But I mean, that's still a good ways away. 3 years, 4 years, 3 years.
Right.
The other part is getting manufacturers certifying their products to this subject, right? Because now you put all that time and money in testing, engineering, and listing to the subject or certifying yourself to the subject. You go out and make waves about it and get it on the AHJ's radar and get it on building officials' radar, even before it's in the code. And I mean, LA County is very good at staying on top of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, they actually read the standards.
Yeah.
Right?
They're ahead of it.
I think it's a quintessential push and pull, where you just have, it's created, then some people demanded, then more people demanded, then it changes, then, it's sort of a very fluid, iterative process. And we've lived through that with 2703, lived through that. And now it is where it is. Very, very popular. And 2703A will likely go through a very similar process.
The same thing. Well, gentlemen, wow. My head's spinning a little bit. But it's great. I think this is so educational and so important for everyone to understand, to know, to be on the outlook for, to be on the lookout for. So thank you. And I know we will be having a lot of information from S5 coming through your directory, talking about these standards. We're going to have some more podcasts where we're going to be continuing to talk through this. So I just have to say thank you so much for all the information.
Yeah. And I mean, us, we're going to put it on our YouTube. Patrick does an amazing job and clearly identify stuff with S5 University. And it's done from a neutral standpoint. I get we have competitors. That's just the world. Competitors make you sharpen your skills.
We're friends with a lot of competitors.
Yeah.
And it's important. And so we have that S5 University that's going to incorporate a lot of this stuff. So if you want to know more, it's there.
Yeah, and it is so easy to find. The S5 University is so cool. You can find it in the S5 directory on Roofers Coffee Shop and Metal Coffee Shop. So check it out. That's where you can take this one step further from this podcast and really learn a lot and get your business ready. So, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Heidi. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. Great stuff for your business. We're going to keep bringing it. Thank you. Please check out the directory for S5 where you can find a lot of this information. And it'll also get you to the S5 University where you can just really, really understand what's going on with solar attachments and metal roofing. Also, please check out all of our podcasts under the Read, Listen, Watch navigation under Roofing Road Trips, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and set those notifications so you don't miss a single episode. We'll be seeing you next time on Roofing Road Trips.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a review. Thanks for listening. This has been Roofing Road Trips with Heidi from the RoofersCoffeeShop.com.